I'm seeing myself, yeah,
Hmm.
on my Twitch screen. So there I am. Hello. I'm soy facing right now.
Oh yeah, it's working. Great. Uh, yes, let us soy face to ring in the new year.
Yes.
Okay, hello everybody. This is Bryn Niebuhr. We're on Dullcare Twitch with Matt Christman. Hello everyone. Say hello to the world, Matt.
Hey guys. Hello world.
So, Matt, I asked you on to this show because I started this sort of, I mean, I'm sort of inspired by you and a couple other people that you can just sort of go online and rant and like debate with people and sort of yell at people, and people like that.
Yeah, I gotta say it's been very helpful. There's this whole quarantine thing. I don't
Yeah.
know what I would have done if I
It's,
hadn't been able to just yell at the at my computer and have know that someone was paying attention to it.
it's especially, I mean, for me, I don't know if you're, I feel like you're less of an extrovert than me, but like for me, not having any human contact was very very painful. So any sort of excuse I can get to talk to people even in a virtual format is pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I kind of I kind of decided to do this stream because of getting what I've been calling CIA pilled, mostly through reading a couple of books. A book that you recommended, Chaos by Tom O'Neill,
Oh yeah.
a few years ago, and then The Devil's Chessboard, the Talbot book.
Yes.
Sort of just going down this rabbit hole, started to listen to Mr. Michael Judge's podcast. Um, Death is just around the corner. Um, and going down this rabbit hole has been really interesting for me because I have sort of always been the one who's like, oh, in my friend group, people are like, well, if you want to hear weird shit, talk to Bryn. And I feel like that's been your experience too, because you were the one who like told me about Skinwalker Ranch and all this kind of stuff. So I kind of wanted to talk to you about the questions that I've been dealing with on a sort of more broad scale of like how do you deal with uh, what is true, and hopefully trying to find out what is reasonable to believe, and then how do you express that to people, and how is it helpful to radicalize other people or get people to understand what's going on, really going on.
Yeah. Uh, I know. I'm seeing. I've been witnessing sort of the rising of this like heightened awareness of parapolitics, CIA, all this stuff over the last couple of years. And it does. It seems like with most things, it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Where it does have the capacity to make people more aware of like the intervention, like the idea that the government isn't just politics. Like the government isn't just people we elect,
Well, it
and
isn't
that
the
there
game
are
show.
yeah, and that there are forces that intervene to neutralize what we think of as an expression of any kind of popular will, and that's important because without that, people, they become naive and they lose the measure of their opponent. Uh, but the downside, and the thing that I try to push against when I can, is that if you really absorb, the maximalist analysis that comes from diving into this stuff, you leave no real room at all for any anything being, any event being anything other than the inevitable result of like the national security state intervening.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then there really is no uh, case for action of any kind because how are you going to beat the CIA?
Well, not as an individual, sure. Yeah. I mean,
Well, I mean, even collectively though,
yeah.
because like I don't really know where like you could even say, well, yeah, like voting isn't going to do it, but like what what conceivable mobilization of the population could neutralize a force that's that capable of manipulating events and even more importantly manipulating the perception of events.
there's a certain sense for me that I totally agree with you that there's a certain feeling that if you that the CIA pill is the black pill, right? Like
Yeah,
it
right,
can
exactly.
it can seem as though, well, if the CIA can kill a president and is a completely unelected, like for example, I think now back about Bernie Sanders, who everyone was very pumped about for a long time. They didn't kill him, but they had a literal CIA agent run and tried to destroy his campaign. And it's weird to imagine that they would have ever let him be president. Um,
That's true, but see, I, I I think that also could be problematic because the problem. I think I just read Matt Karp's piece about the Bernie campaign in Jacobin, which I thought was a very clear-eyed analysis of exactly what went wrong.
mhm.
And the real thing that happened there is that Bernie failed to gain any sort of engagement outside of the realm of people who already participated in party primaries, and
Totally.
in fact, a smaller percentage of those than who had been even 4 years previously engaged.
Mhm.
Because this, we are seeing before us, like uh, as the realistic aperture for political actions shrinks, as what voting gets us becomes less and less substantial,
Yeah.
a lot of people make a informed decision really to just sort of ignore it and try to like spend that mental energy on a lot. And you can't really argue that they're wrong to do that, but what it means is that even when someone like Bernie shows up who might be a paradigm shift from what they're used to, there's no reason for them to especially believe that because they haven't already absorbed, like a whole framework of politics that comes with people that we all assume sort of emerges from the like living in this like late capitalist twilight of empire. But there is no universal. We now know, I think, that you can't universalize that assumption, and that's what stopped Bernie from winning. And like, yeah, I'm sure that if he had gotten closer, right, like if he had actually been able to get outside of the bubble of like politically engaged people and gotten to a critical mass that could have won a primary and then made him the presidency, then you're starting to talk about what the CIA might do. But the problem is that focusing on that elides the larger, more crucial problem, which is that we don't even have anything close to a critical mass of people who could hypothetically confront the state in any form, in its intelligence services or politically.
Well, I worry to talk about the election. Like I worry that the data, and I think that that's totally true, but I think that the data of like, well, this is who voted and who isn't, like, is it safe to just believe those things? I mean, especially when we've seen so much very obvious like tampering and suppression, like
Well,
Wisconsin. Go.
right, but the thing is that if that's your assumption with all data, then you are completely lost.
Right. I mean, you can't. I mean, but
You're in a hall of mirrors without anything to grab onto. And if that's the case, that's not going to give you any clarity of purpose or idea of what to do next, because how are you even processing the world around you in such a way to draw conclusions?
well, and I think that's why there's the whole argument of like, well, electoralism isn't viable because we don't have a democracy. And I guess I'm sympathetic to that. But at the same time, I think that something like the Bernie campaign got at least, it seems to me like a significant amount of people to a point, at least, maybe this is idealist, but like in a sense that lots of people became aware and involved of the political realities around them in a way that I don't think they would if Bernie hadn't run. Um, so I don't know, but at the same time, I feel like the thing about, for me, one way of looking at the CIA and like the history of America and power in America that could be beneficial is that there's almost a sort of huge piece of class analysis missing from most, well, everyone. I mean, like,
Yeah.
if you even have class consciousness at all, if you don't know that, like, the thing about the Black Lives Matter protests, like, obviously, I completely agree with the concept of wanting police to stop being bad, but I feel like directing all of the anger directly at the police is like four steps away from anyone actually that matters, because you could still feasibly imagine a, very corrupt capitalist uh, situation without the police. Like, you could
Yeah. Yeah.
still capitalists could still subsume the whole movement, and give them what they want without actually changing subjugation of black people, except it
Yeah.
wouldn't be literally violently murdering them in the street, but they'd still be, sent off to Missouri to, do slave labor for private prisons, and you just keep it out of the public eye.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the and I mean that's the thing that's missing from all of this alienation that people are experiencing. The hope is always and it's not really that this is wrong. It's just that it's incomplete. Is that as things get worse for people, they're less able to paper over the misery in their own lives, or explain it away in a way that does not directly confront like the conditions of their lives. And
Right.
that's clearly a phenomenon that's occurring. But this is sort of the first time I think it's ever happened in history when that process of like hyper exploitation, hyper alienation is occurring in a context of complete like epistemic free fall.
Mm.
Like there's no agreed upon reality for people to even start from.
Right.
So like the anger and the frustration erupt, but it ends up getting focused on almost random things. Like not enough people do it. It coalesces around certain things like police, like really obvious expressions of state power and oppression. But
Absolutely.
there is no organizing principle. There is no rubric to push beyond that.
Right, and like Amber said on one of your episodes a few months ago, like, the riots are a pot boiling over.
Yes.
Like, that it doesn't that it takes an apparatus to create a steam engine. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if she said that, but that's what I'm saying. Like, you can have water boil and the pot boil over, but like, if there's nothing catching that, they just put more water in and the pot keeps boiling. Like, there's no reason to change anything
Right.
if you don't have an apparatus that harnesses that energy and power into a direction and then aims and fires at something. And so I think what you're saying about a complete epistemological fallout, the people who are, I think, harnessing the energy the most of what is actually going on in the country is Q.
Absolutely.
And it's really frustrating because my personal belief, based on really nothing, is that Q is an invention of Roger Stone. Like, this is also a deep state ploy to create a situation where you're able to look through a distorted mirror at what is actually happening, and it just leads back to supporting power already.
Yeah. I see. I don't know where Q started. I mean, at this point, it seems like there's good evidence that currently the owner of like the account or the person with the ability to post for Q is the guy who founded 8chan,
Right.
the Philippine pedophile guy,
Jim.
which that makes sense. But I don't really even think it had to have been an operation in any way. I mean, because
It doesn't have to. No.
because Americans like like we operate in a propaganda matrix and have that give many of us an idea of this country that this is fantastical, that it is a delusion, but
Yeah.
it's one that has very deep roots in people's psyche because it's hegemonic. It's a hegemonic ideology. And when faced with like this crisis, this seeing all of the promises of America falling apart in front of your face, uh, there's going to be an urge to find some silver lining, some explanation for how this can be.
Mm.
And having a guy like Trump, who is explicitly ran as an outsider, a guy who was ganged up on by almost the entire establishment when he ran, including the Republican Party, until they had to give up in the face of his overwhelming primary success.
Right.
And then when he took office, was immediately opposed by the majority of mainstream media, and there was a thoroughgoing attempt to neutralize him and to delegitimize him as a president. If that's all you're watching, you're seeing a guy step into the lion's den, saying he's going to drain the swamp, using the language of like a populist insurgency, and of course he gets in there and nothing really changes, but he is still able to stir the pot and direct the conversation and drive the libs and the media crazy in a way that suggests that he must be some sort of threat to someone.
Right.
Like, why would they still be so fucking mad at him if he wasn't a threat to somebody? And so somebody posts some ideas. Hey, you don't know what's happening behind the scenes, and I don't know who that person is, but the uptake of that idea, that's all built in. Like we've been basically waiting for some sort of mystical, like third great awakening in this country to deal with the reality of trying to be a godly citizen, because like Q is deeply, deeply Christian. Like it's infused with millenary evangelicalism.
Yeah. It has to
How
be.
how do you be a Christian in the new world where our lives are largely fabricated in the sense that we are self-consciously immersing ourselves in a cyber pseudo reality to a degree that's never happened before? And how does God live on the internet? How does God exist in a world that is just this desacralized stream of endless content that we are forced to try to navigate? I mean, I think the first great awakening in America in the colonial era was a crisis of people who inherited a Christian tradition that was enmeshed in like the social context of the European countries they came from, ripping themselves out of those foundations, coming to a new place and having to reestablish like what it means to be a Christian. And the answer they came up with was, well, we have this tabula rasa of free real estate, this continent,
Yeah.
we will be taking. And so since there is no social embeddedness for any of us, because even if we all think we're Christian, we also are all coming from different perspectives. We're coming from the old world and we're building something new. Where is God to be found in that? Where is the hand of God to be seen?
Mm.
And the answer, thanks, and the Calvinists helped with this, was God's will is writ in the land, as in what we all do on this continent, the result of that will be God's will. Those who prosper are prospering due to God's will. Those who fail due to God's will. And that's set like the standard, that set the cosmology of American Protestantism that became dominant. And like, at this point, Catholicism is just a branch of American Protestantism, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like the Second Great Awakening in the mid 1820s, 1830s is how do we be Christian in a market?
Mm.
And now that the market and the land have subsumed everything and been replaced, like our autonomy and our day-to-day lives is basically stripped to nothing. We do what we have to do.
Mm-hmm.
Our autonomy, and therefore our sense of free will, which is where our sense of like religious judgment comes from, is entirely uh, expressed online. And so that creates a crisis. Where is God on the internet? And Q gives an answer. And that's why it's going to spread like it's spreading like wildfire, and it's going to take over.
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean,
and it's
it's the new frontier, right?
yeah,
It's
exactly, yes,
everyone wants to be because that's it rings so true because I mean I grew up fundamentalist Christian and there's a huge it's not just an American thing. It's also a very Christian thing of like property ownership somehow. Like
yeah,
this sort of like creating your own heaven on earth like is
that,
like sort of this sort of godliness. It's never stated, but it's like in it's always subtextual, but it permeates everything. Um and I feel like I feel like the next frontier must be some sort of like I don't know, a return to because there's nowhere else. You guys were talking about this on with Mr. Judge about the Mormons, um,
yeah,
and I feel like Q's answer is what like the frontier is the internet.
yeah. No, it is. Yeah, and online, and we will be redeemed by our actions online.
Yeah.
Share by studying the proofs, by sharing the proofs, by sharing the memes, by making the memes,
Mm-hmm.
by memeing it out. We are now finding meaning.
It's
We're
a
finding purpose, and we're finding an action that God can then express His will through the success or failure of.
yeah posting as confession,
Yeah.
which is very strange and a little horrifying.
Oh no, it's terrifying. But that's why it's done. It's become so popular, and why it's going to only become more popular. It's overseas. There's Germany, the Raven round Q shit, because and every country the life is just getting worse, and more importantly, there is no conceivable horizon by which it gets better, which is really one of the main ways that you vent off social discontent is a vision of the future of some kind.
Yeah.
It is no longer on anyone's agenda. No one can plausibly project a future that is even as good as this shit.
Mm.
And so anybody who tries to politic on those terms, on terms of policy that's going to create X, Y, and Z, will be fundamentally disbelieved because everyone knows at some level that nothing that a politician can promise can do anything about the situation we're in. And so only the hope of like a cataclysmic apocalyptic redemption
Yeah.
can stand in for a future. And so it's only going to become more popular, and it's going to consume first the Republican base, but then a big chunk of the Democratic base and people who are not politically engaged right now,
Mm-hmm.
because it gives an answer. It gives answers to the questions, and it provides a horizon for potential redemption, which no other uh, 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 political uh, agenda or party, or certainly not anything on mainstream media can offer.
Right. And I think what's so annoying about it, I guess, or so dangerous about Q is that it sort of is a sort of distorted communism, right? Like the idea is that it's some sort of revolution. And it's funny, I know a few Q people and they use those words
Yeah,
like,
and it's a revolution specifically against an elite,
yeah,
and they view it as they explicitly view it as like yes, the deep state, but also deep state and an economic elite as well.
yeah. And it's not even always racist. It's not even always
No, yeah,
perceivably right wing.
yeah, like and and it's only going to get more so because it alienates, because people are alienated because they feel like they don't have freedom, and then whenever that mere freedom they do have is constrained, they feel that even more. That's where anti-vax sentiment comes in.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I have very little control over my life, and I can't even control what goes in my body or my children's bodies.
Right.
Same thing with masks and COVID. I have so little freedom in my life, but I can't even go to my favorite restaurants.
Right, because they're just like literally being squished by a boot. Like
Yeah,
I mean, and it's true, they are. Like, I mean, I don't think it's smart to not wear a mask, but I get the feeling. It's I understand where they're coming from. But what's problematic for me, or what frustrates me about it is you would think or hope, I guess, as a, for me, I'm a communist, like you would hope that those are the people who would easily be radicalized by something like communism, and then they just go to this thing that feels somehow exactly the same and completely opposed.
Well, the thing is communism is not. I mean, they don't have any idea what communism is.
Right. And
It's
it's too late.
a concept that's been tainted by the ideology because responding to a disastrous present, but they're not re-examining like the old architecture of their thoughts. Q exists because that's hard for people. That is painful. And it takes a certain personality type. I see a lot of leftists, and they take and I know I do it myself and have in my life. They take pride in like deprogramming themselves, right?
Yeah, love it.
And like believing, all that patriotic bullshit I learned. That's all. Did you know about Columbus and all that? And they feel like that's taking control of their life. But that's if you don't feel like if you're not moving towards something and doing that, it's just a further dislocation and a further sense of like you're even less secure. Like, oh no, you have to deprogram all this stuff. Well, why? Like, for what purpose? Like so you can join what? Like, there is no movement really. There is
No.
no coherency to the left in any way. There's no structures that could realistically someone could realistically join. Whereas Q just puts on top of your existing ideological matrix a new layer that ratifies everything you've already believed. Instead of putting you further at a loss, it grounds you and says, no, you aren't wrong. This country is what you think it is. And there are patriots who are working to make it that way.
Mm.
Whereas communism says, like, no, all that you've learned is wrong. And now what? Well, here's a pamphlet, you know, dank memes. There's just isn't enough of a counter hegemonic, like, not just a system of like removing old ideology, but a new one, rebuilding a new firmament that people can like feel attached to and feel like they can move forward from.
Absolutely. And the problem is that I feel like the left, as there, if there is one, which I mean, but
Yeah, yeah,
there isn't. The problem is that like everyone who is a liberal and going to Black Lives Matter protests wants structure, right? Like they want something to happen. Um, and I feel like there's no structure to create that. And our internet game isn't even touching QAnon. Um, and so I guess my what I think about is, what do we learn from that? What is there to be done, in the sense of like there must be some sense that QAnon speaks to, right? It's not just you're right. There's people who already know it's wrong, but then where do they go? Even online, like
yeah,
QAnon has places to go. We barely even have that.
yeah. And more importantly, the places that you can go for the left, people are very fixated on making sure you're the right kind of leftist,
Right.
which and that you have purged yourself of like white privilege or something, uh, which with no reason for you as a person who's like newly disenchanted to know that that's a thing or that it's wrong or anything like that. You
Mm-hmm.
need to already know. You need to already accept all these premises to be acceptable. Whereas Q, it's just, hey, jump in. There's
Yeah.
nothing asked of you other than just keeping an open mind. Whereas left is the demand. No, you must have already done all of this work to even be acceptable in these spaces.
Right. And there's a certain level of sympatheticness. There's like, well, you don't want everyone to be racist. You shouldn't be like having, Nazis or whatever be able to, be like, we should have a nationalist or whatever. But like that stuff is so fringe anyway.
Right.
What I'm saying is the goalpost for that is constantly moving, because then it's like, okay, well, you understand why racism is bad, but you need to know why demisexuality is an oppressive. It's like,
Right.
what
Yeah.
are we talking about? Do we
Yeah.
want to fucking do we want to end the state or not? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I feel like we can have those conversations once we are in control of education. Once we're in control of like anything,
Yeah.
we should be working towards that. But like, yeah, I think you're right that there's no space
Yeah.
for
Well, the
people to
problem is
just jump in.
people mostly view it, and subconsciously, and not their fault. People view the left online as what it really is, which is a subculture.
It's a brand.
Yeah, it's a consumer subculture. And so all of that sorting people do, which is absolutely it goes against any kind of meaningful building operation, which is what needs to be done. But it serves the purpose of keeping out the pseuds and keeping out the posers,
Right.
which is the number one prerogative of any cultural of like a subculture.
Yeah.
And people don't even know that's why they're doing it. Like they'll tell you all day, no, we need to keep these spaces safe, whatever the hell. What they really mean by that is the same thing like a goth means when like a cool kid comes to the show.
Yeah, you're wearing blue jeans. Fuck off.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and no, it's the same exact. I mean, and growing up goth and communist like since 2006 or whatever. Like I totally have that sense is in me,
Right.
where it's like you're not really one of us.
Right.
Is a thing that my brain does, and I know that that's bad. And it's time to self crit. But I think that it's also very dangerous when I completely agree that what absolutely has to be done is like we just need to pick a party and
Yeah.
then everyone needs to join it, and then we all have to decide on what we're doing and then all do it and all support it. Like
Yeah.
those three things should be the easiest part, and it's like it hasn't been done since the 60s.
Yeah.
And we have the internet now.
Yeah, exactly. And we have the internet, which gives people an illusion of influence. Like the way people are so cavalier with certain, like during when the Black Lives Matter protests started, and like police and prison abolition became essentially litmus tests. If you didn't support police abolition and prison abolition, well, then you love cops and you're a bootlicker.
Right.
And you would say, well, I mean, a lot of people they don't know what you're talking about. This is very radical sounding to them. They don't know what these things mean. They know that there's bad guys. They're steeped in ideology. What do you say to them? And the answer is, and what about X, Y, and Z questions? And they basically always say, those aren't good faith questions. Those have all been answered. You should read, like, Angela Davis already covered all of this.
Right. Read the book.
X, Y, or Z book. It's like,
no one's gonna read the book.
That the number of people who've read this shit, and frankly, half the people who make these like blasé claims haven't read the article.
Have not read it at all.
They're just bullshitting. You could fit them in a fucking like a ballroom. You could fit them in a 7 train.
Yeah.
But because that's the only people that are engaging, you assume that this is everyone's read this, everyone knows this, and if you you raise any questions about this, well, you're lying. You know the answers to these. You're just trying to derail. You're sea lioning.
Yeah, it's bullshit because I mean the thing about it is like Lenin knew that people weren't gonna fucking read. Like we gotta have the tiniest shit because all there was reading. Like if it was now, it would be posting. It would be podcasts. It would be Twitch chats, and that's where I'm coming from. It's like I don't want to fucking. I want to make the party. If there's gonna be a party, it needs to have like 5 YouTube videos, and you gotta watch those, and that's it. You know what I mean? Just like go, and then everything will make sense, and then you're on board. Like
like a PragerU type deal.
Yeah, absolutely. PragerU, a couple of Twitch channels, like it has to be easy. You're completely right. And if it isn't, and this is the thing, it's not easy. Because actually trying to make fundamental changes to power structure, like we were saying, they're not going to let us do it.
No. But like the one thing that can kind of reassure you as well, it probably won't even get to that point where they will have to intervene. We'll
No.
fuck up ourselves.
Well, that's another thing is that like there's the whole concept of like infiltration, and I went through this sort of I had an inkling that the Michael Reinhold thing with the Patriot Prayer thing in Portland, like that didn't sit right with me, and I made some posts about it, um, and people got very mad that I would imply or suggest that uh, the state might be infiltrating these sorts of protests or whatever, and I get that it's unnecessary. Like they don't have to be doing that for us to not have any power because we don't.
Right.
But I think that it's interesting. I guess sort of what I've been sort of tumbling around in my head, and one of the things I've been talking about on this stream is like, how do you when you're dealing with an enemy that's entirely about lying, like you either sound crazy or you just don't have truth. You just accept everything they do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I feel like we're gonna have to get a little used to sounding crazy. And I remember
Yeah.
and I remember even when like in 2016 when like the DSA uh started, their numbers started growing. Like there was a certain sense for me that was like uh is it cool? And I
Yeah.
think, and I had to be like, well, who cares if it's cool? Like, or who cares if it's real or not? Who cares if it's actually going to do something? Like, if you don't get involved with what people are already on board with, nothing is ever going to happen. And I feel like that's been something that I've had to interrogate in myself and just be like, we have to just do something. Um, and whatever comes up, I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's very difficult to look at something and say, this is beneficial and we should just do it.
Yeah. Because I think a lot of it is because people are so terrified of failure that
Yeah, especially
there's
us.
something there's something soothing and honestly advantageous depending on where you are like positioned in like the discourse hierarchy to just talking it out forever,
Mm-hmm.
to just like keeping the arguments going. And the
Yeah.
thing that really hit me about that was there were like 2016, 2017, the discourse, absolute brain rotting garbage. The
Yeah.
same arguments being made by the same people, no resolution, only even being had to give people something to do and to choose enemies and allies. And then the Bernie campaign started, and it really did. You could see it. Like all this bullshit really did subsume
Yes.
for the most hardcore cranks who were really only in it for the arguments. People were willing to put that bullshit aside. And then as soon as the Bernie campaign ended, and then we went back into lockdown, so everyone starts posting up a storm. The exact same arguments start up.
I know.
The exact same people, and with the exact same sterile dynamic. And that was really what made me realize that I had to like step away from it and like wonder what the hell I was even doing, because it really made me think, oh no, like people are so terrified of taking the next step because they don't know what it is. And we have not created an apparatus for creating consensus around anything, because we did that instead, argued instead of having a consensus. And then the Bernie campaign kind of came in as an external thing to subsume our conflict and to like solve those questions for us. And then as soon as it left, we went back to, oh no, we how are we supposed to move forward now, when we never bothered to create a consensual reality to move from.
Right. And I feel like the only argument worth having during the Bernie campaign was that the DSA needs to become its own party. Like, or what the entire structure of this movement needs to be its separate party that like can break off from the Democratic Party. And that was an argument that was like, just make something, anything that has an apparatus, right? And then but that wasn't even anyone was really talking about it, because I do think that the Bernie Sanders campaign was a worthwhile thing that would have actually changed people's material conditions a modicum, like a little bit. People, if he had won presidency, people would have, there would have been benefits for people. And I feel like everyone was able to sort of just agree that like this was a worthwhile thing to do. And now that there's nothing worth, that people just, now that that isn't in front of them. And also, this is why I am so insistent that like leaders have to exist in America. Like there has to be somebody who's just like, we're doing this, someone everyone trusts, someone people agree with and already like and has followings. Like somebody's got to say we're all doing this and everyone's coming with us. Because if Bernie Sanders wasn't there, it wouldn't have just happened. You know what I mean? Like this guy was already had power.
Yeah, yeah, but there doesn't really seem to be anything on the horizon.
Right? No, there isn't, and I think that's sort of the, because I guess what can you do
Yeah,
um besides, I mean, I don't know. I kind of doubt that there's ever going to be some sort of like grassroots thing. I mean, like I don't
yeah,
see something, especially in America in 2020, like I don't see something like Black Lives Matter becoming a radical party,
no,
because it will always be subsumed by, people like D-Ray, like liberal grifters who are just like going using it to sort of like pad out the resume or whatever.
yeah.
Um, so so I guess what I wanted to continue to ask is like, does educating people at all on sort of why these things don't work, uh, and why the history of America is different, is that useful in radicalizing people or building anything?
Well, I mean, the problem with it is that you're generally talking already to a self-selected group of people. Like, the outreach element is seems to be pretty absent because as a subculture, it's self-selecting. Like the people who engage with this content are people who are already predisposed in one degree or another to accept it. And the numbers show us that there needs to be a massive amount of like radicalization of people who currently have not accepted any of the premises of people that we assume as leftists, and as such are not going to ever engage with this material in any way other than just as an accident, and then would likely find it befuddling. You might get some trickle, but it would not be in any way substantial enough. I think honestly, it's going to happen at. I mean, I don't think it's going. I don't think we're going to see any real movement at the level of sparks at the level of like outreach and content and stuff. Even though it will form something people can be directed towards, which is useful, they're going to have to be directed by people they know. They're going to have to be the people that need to see this stuff are going to have to be directed to it by trusted people they know, because
Yeah.
otherwise it's just more shit.
Hmm.
It's just more shit out there to wade through in your day to day life.
People in the chat are asking, uh basically, is there like, why not this party, why don't we all just agree on a party like that is currently existing? And I think about that sometimes, and I feel like I always feel like I'm not supposed to say like let's all agree on a party that I'm not even a part of. Do
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like I'm not actually a member of any particular party. People are saying things like Socialist Party, USA, PSL, etc. And I wonder your opinion on that. Like, do you
Well,
do you also feel like as a commentator or pundit or whatever, like it's not our place to say like,
oh yeah, like I'm not a member of any of these. How am I supposed to know anything about them? And my main interaction with them is just seeing their lack of success. Honestly,
right?
it's like they haven't done much with. Like, these are organizations that have been around for decades, and they have not moved beyond being crank warehouses, essentially. And if that's the case, I don't see how they could scale up. Certainly none of the cadre parties, like the parties that require like you paying dues and like going to classes and shit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that just seems like an absolute non-starter.
Yeah, and I mean the I find the issue with that. I mean, in terms of building some kind of movement. I mean, I've tried to join some of those parties, and like they don't have the infrastructure. They don't have like they're trying to um they're trying to create a situation where everyone is like on the level, I guess. But like if you can't even accept the people who are already there, who are
Yeah,
already
yeah,
like
right.
probably maybe more radical than you, like like I say, like I'm a communist, I want communism, and it's like I can't, if I can like go to meetings for a year and not even like understand how the apparatus is supposed to work because
Right.
I'm not being talked to, then your party is fucked up. Like it's not anything. It's a reading group.
Yeah,
And this
right.
is the issue I've always felt with anarchists. Like when I was growing up, like, that was what was presented to me as the left. And I'd be like, all right, what are we going to do? Like, are we going to blow up something? Are we going to like spray paint something? Are we going to do anything? And like, that's not how they function, because they're not, a lot of times their ideology is just like, it's actually oppressive and hierarchical to make a plan. Like literally someone told me that when in like I'm not even trying to be mean to anarchists, like I'm just saying like that was my experience. um
Yeah.
so
One of the biggest problems is that any exit Oregon, this is why I really don't think it will be anything that currently exists. Uh, it will, because if you're joining an org, it's one that already has existing people in it who already have existing, statuses within this organization. And a lot of the times they're going to be, I mean, yeah, they have like a kind of a halo around their head because they were out there like toiling in the wilderness before, there was any kind of left in this country. But the flip side of that is that they have, they will also be more likely to be people who are motivated by interpersonal, like a need to be in charge of something, a need to feel like superior in some way, some sort of psychological element. Because why were they there that long? Yeah, yeah, yeah. They believe in it and they're dedicated, but that's not the only reason. And so that means that new people are seen as a threat. New people are seen as a potential to undermine their position in the hierarchy,
right.
even if they insist that there is no hierarchy.
Which
Uh,
is hilarious. Why would you
yeah,
want that? Yeah, and I mean, I feel like my biggest hopes for organization are something actually radical to come out of the Black Lives Matter movement. Like I want to see like a actual new sort of like militant Black Panther Party or something. And I think that might actually be somewhere that people would be okay with, like, rising out of it, or another country like has to come and be like, join this infrastructure.
yeah. Well, the problem is there we don't have there. I mean, we lost a lot when the Soviet Union collapsed. One of the big things was any
Yeah.
kind of international ally, and that's my main issue with people who really fetishize China. It's
Mm-hmm.
like I don't even give a shit about what they're doing in their own country. Forget that, table it, because I buy the argument that I can't know because everything I'm going to read is propaganda. Sure,
Yeah.
fine,
Mm-hmm.
but even if we're forgetting that, China has no interest in exporting communism ideologically.
It doesn't seem
At
that.
all.
It doesn't
Zero.
seem that way. I
And
find that
so
very.
And so to me, that means why do I have to critically support China? Why do I have to give a shit? Why do I have to defend them?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure, it might be propaganda, but what does it matter to me? They have no interest in international solidarity. So it really does seem like when Americans fixate on like trying to defend China, it's this like it's a security blanket. It's just like, well, it's like a Prester John, like a medieval Christianity had this myth of a
Yeah.
in the Christian kingdom that was going to like redeem the world away from like the Mohammedans,
Mm-hmm.
and it was led by Prester John. And like China is that for these people, because what is the actual connective tissue? What are they doing for us? And if it's nothing, then it seems to me that like the structure of their government and whether it's socialism or not is pretty much irrelevant to me.
That's the only sort of like addendum or counter to that is that they did seem to support Venezuela when we tried to do a fucking coup there. Um, they sent some troops there, but like, who knows if that even matters to them that
Well,
they're
yeah,
like
but that's
somewhat
also that's about
socialist or whatever.
oil. It's also about oil. I mean, come on, it's the
Mm-hmm.
biggest oil reserves in the world.
Yeah, and they don't want us to have it.
China is a huge oil importer. They don't have a lot of oil in China. Like you can see the realpolitik here. They're not doing stuff like Cuba sending troops to Angola, you
Right.
know, or there's no solidarity to any of their actions. Like Belt and Road, they'll deal with any psychotic reactionary tin partnership in exchange for essentially getting equity in like their infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
And you could say it's not colonialism, and fine, maybe it isn't, but it isn't communism. It isn't. It isn't creating like international solidarity either.
It doesn't
And
feel like
because
it.
we're
I
just
mean,
in time at this moment, people will kind of take anything and like build it up.
right. And I feel like for me, like when I said other country, I guess I meant like I would hope that someone like Venezuela, a closer, something lower would at least try to counteract the massive propaganda campaign with like it wouldn't cost anything for people like China or Cuba to like start you know having internet groups of like this is real communism, you're Americans, like let's just like have some brain mind share, like if you guys are communists and you support us, like let's start separating off chunks of America of people who at least say they support something like Cuba or China, but they don't, and I don't know why.
I mean, I think most people are just. I think everybody everywhere is really. They're operating in a survival context where nobody can think beyond like the foot in front of them.
And this is
And
why I think that I sometimes get pushback when I talk about the CIA, um, and like especially it's been 9/11 this week, and talking about like I've had people say things like saying that the CIA did something takes away agency from
yeah,
like whatever Muslim terrorists or whatever. And it's
yeah,
like, okay, I'm not saying other people have never done anything, but we live in a world where we are not only a global superpower, but we are like the aggressor of everything. Like every
yeah,
single country is not untouched by the fucking dark tentacle of America. And like there is no agency to be had when you have a force like this. I think you're right. Everyone is sort of in defensive mode, even fucking China.
yeah. No,
Who
I mean, China has basically seen the writing on the wall that there's not going to be any international cooperation on climate amelioration or anything like that. And so the only thing to do is to create as much uh, ca- capital accumulation as possible in the shorter time as possible, so that the stakeholders involved can be in the most advantageous possible position to ride out whatever comes.
right. All right. Well, it's been almost an hour. So one last thing I want to ask, unless you want to keep going, is I feel like a big thing in the last 4 years has been, I guess the last couple of years, has been supporting. I feel like a lot of the left in America is still sort of under the impression that we can work within the Democratic Party. People still talk about AOC. People still talk about Ilhan Omar. Uh, and to me, I mean, maybe this is the sort of CIA black pill or whatever, but like there's a certain sense to me that like, I don't know if there's going to be an election in 2024. Like, I feel like putting faith and be like, okay, get ready to vote again or get ready to support a Democratic person is a little bit fanciful or a bit of a dream. that they're not interested. They are your enemies, and I don't know if it's a good idea to ever try and like do the Bernie thing again. Um,
I mean, I don't think you can do the Bernie thing again just because I think he was a sui generis figure.
okay.
Uh, I don't think we're going to be. We'll see what happens in the fall, but like because there is because Trump as a phenomenon is accelerating like the erosion of a lot of like the fictions of democratic participation and and checks and balances that we had all sort of assumed to exist.
Hmm.
And depending on what happens in November, it could the whole house of cards could fall over. But if it doesn't, like I would say that if Biden wins,
Which is like
uh,
what, 50-50?
I'd say it's about 50-50.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have no
Uh,
idea.
Biden wins and takes office. I think that the even as things get worse, and they will only keep getting worse,
Oh yeah.
I think that there will be a concerted effort on the entire political class, including the Republican Party, to build back up legitimacy in politics to avoid the queuification of the entire American electorate. And
Yeah.
they will not be fully successful at that, certainly, but I think it will lead to like politics continuing on. But I just don't think there's the time or the person who could possibly be a credible like Bernie in 2024. I think if there's going to be organized, I mean, I actually think a Biden presidency is the best chance we have for actually getting a critical level of alienation with the Republican or Democratic Party among Democratic voters, which is a big, big chunk of people. Like
Mm.
people who just vote for Democrats, not primaries, like in general elections. That's a lot of people, and they are some of the most ideologically ensorcelled people we have in this country.
Yeah.
They are they're in a position where they are have their beliefs dictated to them by the party, which the Republicans at this point don't have because like there's such a synchronicity between like the aims, the true desires of like the Republican base and the party apparatus that they actually get to call the shots. Like Trump was not the Republican Party's idea of a candidate; they insisted upon him. Fox News, Hannity, people forget this. They were against Trump at first. They said this guy used to be a Democrat. He's not serious. And the voters and the viewers of Fox News basically made them change their fucking tune.
Yeah.
Whereas the Democrats said Bernie's crazy. He's not going to get anything done. He's also racist. And they said that, and yes, I believe that. I agree with that, even though it was just poured into their heads. And the only thing that's going to break that spell is seeing Biden get in there, and without even the patina of like racial progress that Obama represented, just
Eat shit.
hunger chancellor shipping the fuck out of this crisis. And there might actually be, I'm not saying there will be, but in that context, you could see alienation. But it would not, I don't think it would happen fast enough for there to be a credible 2024 like left challenger, but it could lead to an actual creation of like a alternative party. Like you could
Yeah.
see a Whig style breakup, and or the beginnings of one because it doesn't happen overnight. And I would say that if that party emerges, it probably is not one that already exists. It will probably be one that will have to come out of the particular experience of Biden's presidency and the alienation associated with it.
Right. And I think I mean, it's hard to imagine it not being like a rad lib kind of thing where it's like not necessarily anti-capitalism, but anti all the bad things, you know? But I mean, I think if you actually do have enough time to create a situation where the Democrats who would be completely alienated by Joe Biden, which I totally agree with, and I've said before, if you imagine them, there has to be an infrastructure for them to fall into. There has to be a leftist queue that is easy enough for them to say like, hey,
Yeah,
because those liberals, they aren't swayed by the sort of frontiersman like American volkishness. Do you know what I mean? Like
yeah,
they're not that kind of person. They are the like, hey, we need to be against the fat cats and against the, they're the Gen Xers and the Tiva wearers who are like, I want to be a part of a movement that actually changes things and betters people's lives. And if you can create a sort of like crunchy slash communist party that like allows those people to come, you might be looking at like the Q party versus whatever that party is.
Yeah, but it would have to have celebrities,
Yes.
and it would have to have easily digestible like narratives. That's the key.
John Cusack.
John Q.
John
Sack.
Q- John Cusack, Boots Riley.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, like, and I think the celebrity thing is getting to a point where a lot of people are sort of real. Like, have you seen the trailer for that fucking Hampton movie that's coming out?
I did. Yeah,
Like, I have. It smells bad to me, but I have a little bit of hope that it'll be interesting. Like the idea that he's just standing on stage and saying nothing of consequence, but I am a revolutionary. The whole trailer smells really bad to me. But like, I think
well, I
there.
mean, I wouldn't really expect anything else from a trailer.
I mean, I'm scared, but I feel like people who made that movie, like people like Lakeith Stanfield and Daniel, I can never pronounce his name. Like, there's people out there who want a new party, who want new power, away from the Democratic Party, who have like this sort of like social monopoly on like the quote unquote black vote. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And I feel like it's ripe for that. There's something that I feel like there is a smell in the air that that could happen. Celebrities, uh, and then all of the alienated. So I guess we should hope that Trump doesn't win.
I mean, it's very hard for me to see a second Trump term resulting in anything other than a further sort of huddling under the skirts of the Democratic establishment as like a fake bulwark against his rapaciousness, even though they failed to defeat him twice.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess you're right, but like
Maybe
all,
that'll be the thing. Maybe that'll be the final brain breaking thing is that they fucked it up again.
yeah,
But maybe, and more likely, honestly, than anything, we'll keep hoping until the seas claim us. But there's nothing else to do because we're alive, and to live is to hope.
yeah, and that is correct. And I think that to if there is a chance that another party that can rise out of the Black Lives Matter movement, out of the alienated Joe Biden supporters and fucking Warren support. Like I have liberal friends who, when Pete was running, they're like, "Oh, okay, he could actually change things," and I had to be like, "Okay, you have to understand some things," and they came around to understanding that there is an evil in the Democratic Party because of what they saw.
Yeah, yeah.
And I feel like there's the freaks and blue checks who are gonna continue hanging on, but I think you're completely right that they're all gonna have to fall somewhere. And I think if there's one thing I want to do is help somehow, like create a trampoline for them to fall on.
Yeah. That's
So
all we can hope for right now.
yeah. All right, man. Well, thanks so much for coming on. This
Yeah,
has
thanks for
been
having me.
super interesting. I hope you come back on sometime if you want to get
Absolutely.
deeper into the deep state.
Hell yeah.
All right, man. Well, this has been Dull Care, everybody. Thanks for watching this, and we will see you next time.
Bye bye.
Bye.